makes it easier.
I I'll, I'm going to work on my Deno stuff, but I didn't want to break Ryan's stream.
And maybe this is a silly observation from my perspective, but I think use effects problem isn't that isn't a need for effects or whatever. It's just that like use effect is an escape hatch, and that's the point at which you realize the React model isn't what you thought it was. And as long as we have those escape hatches and the delta gets further between the abstraction and the underlying model, I think there's a perceived complexity there. I could be wrong. Maybe we can patch those escape hatches. They don't need to exist. But I think that's the crux of the DX consideration there. It's like, how much are you fighting the fact that the DOM is the underlying model? It's an interesting thought experiment. So again, this is I this is kind of like an interesting place where you can definitely see that there's trade-offs both ways. And then my third point, so I have 3 points here. Universalizing the language UI. We already talked about it. State, derived state, effects. State, memo, effect. Ref, computed, effect. Signal, memo, effect. Observable, computed, auto run. Observable, pure computed, computed. Let, $, assignment, $. This language is literally everywhere. With Angular actually coming on signals, every framework has pretty much has this language, except maybe like lit or something. I don't know. Maybe lit does. I know they have some kind of reactivity thing, but I think like we're seeing the convergence of language, even if the implementations aren't the same. And obviously, there's differences because, like, obviously for like React, you have additional hooks which kind of like you can talk about performance and stuff. You know, you talk about memoization, and but when forget comes out, those will go away. So I think we can kind of like Dan explains how those kind of work, and you can it's good for understanding React's mental model, but kind of tertiary to the discussion here. It's like we're converging on this universal language. The interesting part to me is, you know, and we already had this discussion on thread. I'm just saying like how important is this versus this, and which ultimately I think comes down the purpose of code. Should we optimize making it easier to write or easier to read? And I think that maybe isn't that profound of a question. I think for a long time the answer would have been easier to read, right? You don't write code for yourselves. It's, you know, you write code for the computer, but you also write code for other humans. You work on a team. So like presumably, maybe not, maybe you're by yourself, but easier to read probably has higher value. But I think this is funny, and it's going to get to the end of the article, but I think there is a question that easier to write might actually have some benefits. Um, right. So like, okay, I talk about trade-offs. We talked about these all before, but I think the key one here is like JavaScript is not a reactive language. It's not like a data flow language, so it's possible to lose reactivity. Signals have like one rule, like which is like, you know, don't do like where they read matters. But the problem is that one rule gets manifest in a whole bunch of different ways. So it's like it's not like there's like multiple different rules. It's just like it's just the fact that like this one fact that where you access the data matters is the single biggest trade-off. And I can understand if people like that doesn't align with your mental model, like that's fine. Like don't use this stuff. You know, it's good that we have alternatives. Um, but like I think that's mostly the big one, and it is a big one. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying I talked a bit about disposal, but we already talked about that. You know, SJS did an amazing job there. Talk about these uncontrollable graphs. I don't see it, especially with the way things have updated over the last few years. So like really, this is the crux of it. Like, are should we be aware that the language has a reactive primitive or not? Should we, and how do we deal with the fact that JavaScript does not? That's the big trade off. Quoted Evan again, not important, but what? Yeah, I emphasize a bit at the end here that signals don't require a compiler, but you could use a compiler. But I think what I was getting about the read write, I think this might be the last big point I want to talk about here is Dominic Ganaway, creator of Inferno, has been working on a new a new JavaScript framework, and he kind of shared a bit about it a couple weeks ago, and he's like, it's fully compiler driven. There's no virtual DOM, no component re-rendering. There's signals, but they're never exposed. Essentially, he kind of built something the compiler like, that I was kind of pointing to when I was like theorizing. He basically was like, can I solve? Someone, I think it was Maple, wanted to know what his Dominic's framework looked like. Well, guess what? It looks like React, like in the same way that my reactive script example looked like React. Like you generally just write code, that like that kind of top down whatever, and he compiles it into something that kind of looks like solid, right? But he doesn't expose that to the end user. That's basically it. He would resent me saying this because he's done incredible work and he's taken it way further than anything that I talked about in the article. But he sort of is completing like the mission, solving the reactive script problem, right? Like like he's and he's quite successfully, in my understanding, talking to different people. He's showing others that using signals under the hood is a very viable mechanical way of achieving stuff like React Forget. I have a feeling the part of the reason why the like Facebook or Meta people talking about React Forget and the reactivity stuff are aligning it. Like I think they're coming at the same place as where he's coming from. So I think there's something here. But what he was getting at, and this is what the right person to read, he's like this whole debate about signals and React or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's the compiler that matters, right? Right? He's like he's like this is like a semantic syntax change thing. He's like in his head already, Solid's gonna basically be like whatever he's building, React's building Forget. He's like these are all just the same thing. Like Dominic's already like 3 steps ahead or whatever, right? But he's like, now imagine a UI compiler that leverages AI to self-improve. Not only itself in terms of output, but also recognizing the source code that might be the source of bugs, critical analysis of error stacks. This is what next generation UI frameworks are going to be about, not some argument about which reactivity is, what reactivity is and how it's used. Yeah. Basically, like just drop it. and thank you, Dom, for that, because I think he's right, because the cool thing about the language of reactivity rather than the implementation of reactivity, like is that it is analyzable, and as we get better at analyzing it, and like there's so much more to be done. Like this is one facet of that. Another facet of AI is the stuff that Quick's been talking about, but looking at page loads to figure out which part of the JavaScript needs to be loaded. Basically, if we build our libraries and our frameworks around primitives, around building blocks that let us, estimate what the best possible solution is in the future, in theory, computer-assisted tools could finish that story. That is why signals are interesting, because we've taken the fundamental pieces that we need to be able to represent this stuff. It's kind of like what I was talking about Evan Yu being able to like just with Vue basically just pick and choose what he wanted and use the same data representation to do it. This is why it is compelling. Whether or not we end up talking about the syntax of it and like whether this should be a known thing from the language standpoint, like this is a React variable, or we should like pretend that all variables are reactive. That's the distinction here. It's honestly, the thing is, it's a lot harder to pretend all reactive variables are all variables are reactive because of the same problem with UI equals a function of state, right? That's less optimal, right? You kind of work towards like this ideal. Like it's hard to say where that lands, but regardless, recognizing the right building blocks is something of value. Whew. All right.
Okay, so this is limiter.
Right. And Prime asked me when I thought WASM would come into play, because he was really stoked about WASM, and I told him like there's gonna be like the current stage, and then a web where we are, and then I'm like there's gonna be the next stage, and then there's gonna be the next stage, and then it's gonna be WASM. We've got like three more, like two more hops to get to WASM. This I think this is very much in line with that. Dominic's hop is not the next hop, but the hop after, and the next hop's already happening right now. It's the stuff that you're seeing happening with Quick and server components and Islands Runner and all of this, like just the breaking, like it's this reactivity stuff we're talking about right now. Actually, I can even put Solid as part of this, right? Like then there's DOMs, and then there's whatever you're doing, Greg. You're 1, 2, 3. That's my view. Obviously, it's really hard to project stuff that far into the future, but yeah, that's sort of like that's like the simplistic 1, 2, 3. People hate on the front end for too many frameworks, except that's just how the front end community iterates. You wouldn't go to a mathematician and tell them to stop writing proofs. Yeah, yeah, and let's be fair. Like, there isn't that much churn. I mean, everyone's still using React, so like, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I have this thing where I'm trying to do this, but maybe simpler. I guess like lower level, and we're going to just export this limit function, I think.
Factors that play into it that is always like, that's why it's hard to predict. You can see the general trend, but you can't like tell if something's too early and misses the mark. So talking about this stuff is always completely speculative, but the one true thing is that these things will keep on coming up. So I think that like, you know, expect change, right? I mean, that was the whole point of my last, like, my article about predicting for whatever. But anyways, I should get back to make sure I don't show any like hidden tweets. But yeah, this article about heading into 2023, I think last year was an incredible year for proving out technology. We saw stuff like Leptos, you know, like show capability of WASM we didn't see before. We saw Quick. We saw server components, and you know, in a few different versions. You know, stuff to be excited about, right? We saw server functions and compiled RPCs. We see a lot of really cool technologies. They all came out last year. Kind of like the end, like part of this arc that kind of started around 2020. I feel like, and now it's like, how do we actually integrate them? How do we actually like get the DX to the place? But the stuff's all sitting here. It's just like putting together the pieces. Okay. All right. Where was I? Okay, so let's talk about some stuff here. Yeah, I'm gonna look at chat and see if I can catch up on it. What are your thoughts about people not liking things like four? Sorry, I just got here as a missionary. Oh, yeah. I mean, this one's always a little bit funny to me because it's like, but I think it's a misunderstanding. And I actually touched on it in my article, like the tiniest bit. But like, for is just a special map function. It is a runtime process. The compiler is not doing anything special. You could have written your own for. You can use map. You can do whatever the hell you want. So like, for is just JavaScript. See, I said it. For is just JavaScript. See how many people. That's what people take offense to when I say for is just JavaScript. upsets people. But I mean, there's an interesting question. If for is just JavaScript, right? This is the thing, because a lot of people disagree with me that for is just JavaScript. Um, my question here, and I'm going to
Everything
pull
is
this
just
one down,
JavaScript, right?
is this if statement just JavaScript? Right? And this is not React. This is that compiler. Like I, right? Right? Like yeah, in normal React, but I'm talking about when we move to the point that the compiler is actually generating a solid show component basically under the hood for this. i- Is this just JavaScript? Like this is such a funny debate to me. Like it's I know people like will like fight on this hill. Like it's like because yeah, for is literally like a component solid is literally basically literally a function call. So this for compiles to call the function named for. Like it's like the funny thing is like in React, if you wanted to optimize, like I think Adobe has actually made for components for optimization purposes for memoizing they didn't want to create all the VDOM nodes because they had really large, stupidly large components. Like the thing is, this is just a map. It's kind of like when you write a layout component or something or paginated thing or like suspense or error boundaries, which are conditionals. Like
Yeah, it's interesting that I'm doing this thing, and because this function is only included in server stuff, it's like this file is not even included.
if you have some kind of like conditional layout component or something with a render prop or something like that's all show is. It's just like it's basically just a little wrapper. So I feel like people feel like for is too declarative. It makes sense. Yeah, like maybe, but like it's going to be funny because like if like a compiler like this supports like for loop as language syntax, like for doesn't return stuff like map statements do. Like I'm just really like maybe they'll do it like do expressions or whatever, but I'm really curious, and this is part of a perception thing. If people see a compiler, see this and go, yeah, this is just JavaScript, because they're doing this right now with Svelte to a certain degree. Vicharis is always like, no, Svelte is Svelte it's not like, or Svelte script, it's not just JavaScript. But people are just like, yeah, I love Svelte, it's just JavaScript. And you're like, I'm like, not really, no, right? So I think this is one of the most funny pieces, because if the perception continues on that like Svelte or React Forget is just JavaScript when it's kind of like the furthest thing from it, um, then like even debating about for is kind of awkward, because then you're like, okay, I guess I should maybe follow suit, because somehow like a compiler generating completely different code and moving your code around is more just JavaScript than calling a function. Yeah, it's mind-boggling, but I also see a reality where people believe that. So yeah, yeah. Most of this is why I don't go to Reddit, because if I go to Reddit, you just can't. You, between like, when you go in the Reddit comment section, people are going to say stuff which is completely not true. Like just like oh yeah, Solid has no story for universal renderers. It's like no, it does, but and the people argue it like in multiple threads about how that's true, and you're like, no, I created Solid. You can do this. Look, here's an example, and they'll keep on arguing you. So like, yeah, what I'm getting at is like that kind of response. YouTube comments are pretty close, actually, surprisingly. Dev2 is actually much more thoughtful, but like Reddit and YouTube comments are kind of and Hacker News are kind of approaching each other. Reddit's probably the worst. Is like the if I try and debate the 4 thing, I will be there for a year, because you can literally like point that out to someone and be like, look, and they'll be like, downvote, and then everyone's like, downvote, downvote. It's like, yeah, it's funny. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Other common things. I'm sure if we look at Reddit, people will be like, man, yeah, I, I like the response to my article, which is literally like, hey, this is how we solve the problem, will be people going like, yeah, yeah, I don't really like solid because it leads to big spaghetti code and two-way binding and mutability and stuff, and you like, you know, like, and you're just like, I literally just wrote an article that said that that's not the case, and like showed how that's not the case, but now, like, argue with you for like 10 comments, like, yeah, no, everyone knows that Reddit is basically and Hacker News is basically a waste of time. I don't, I have to assume people just like trolling there. It's not that they're like just innately that stupid. Like, it's just like, it's just part of the culture.
Hmm. As const stuff doesn't help.
Yeah, well, the reason that we connect stuff to render roots is to handle the automatic disposal, right? Because otherwise, you'd have to dispose the effects all yourself manually. I talked about this a bit on the trade-offs, is the fact that disposal is a thing. So it's best to keep the effects together. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, you could have leaky programs. Global, it doesn't matter because your app will go away. But if people start like creating effects in like event handlers and stuff, that's why we give the warning. It's something you got to be aware of, but it also like it's a restriction that makes sense, and it's not any more restrictive of saying like your state has to belong in a component tree. That's the thing. Like, just because you can pull stuff out, like the local global scope, doesn't mean that that's actually a good idea. That's the thing. They don't even read the articles. Yeah, no, that's probably it. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I think the difference here is like React's got like majority market share. That's where all the misunderstanding is, and then literally, like, I don't know if this is going to be a Solid win or who else win. Like, everybody's doing a bit of what Solid's doing to varying degrees, and they have to the varying comforts right now, except for React. So like, yeah, I don't know. It might be interesting. We might be in a good place where people think we have a good solution, but there's a lot of choices out there. It's funny, like, maybe if this was earlier on in the life cycle and it would have been more of a thing, but like, it's almost like most of the ecosystem that isn't React has kind of come around to this, and but React is still like the major player, so it's like, you know, it's not quite the same as Tailwind. Hey Dev, welcome back. Turns out most frameworks are pretty good. Yeah, what do you know? People working on stuff and maintaining it for years and years, like, get something somewhere. Yeah, no, what do you know? Yeah, this is all I've been trying to kind of put out there like over the years, because like, I think one of the harshest I've ever been on people is when they tell me like, it just, and this is a little biased, it's just, when I first started putting Solid out there, I got like a lot of hatred about like how I could make the world suffer by introducing a new framework, or a lot of like, the truth of the matter is, when you create a framework and put it out there, and there's similarities and different things, and the thing is, because everyone could make their own framework and change one little feature and then make it say like they needed to make a new framework, and this happened a lot. Like, web components made it so like everyone was like, let's make our own framework. And um the thing is, like, I get it. So, but the truth of the matter is, like, there's a natural phenomenon which stops those frameworks from bubbling to the top. Like, people kind of go, oh, like, if they don't like that one thing and it was that easy to make a framework, well then they'll make their own framework. You know what I mean? Like it's only when you get to a point that something substantial or important happens that these things actually get to a certain degree. It was just really funny, right? Because like as you go through that process, you know, the truth of the matter is most critics aren't going to actually look at what you're doing. They're going to do a quick glance and go, this doesn't offer anything new. Like my favorite ones for Solid have always been where people are like, yeah, this is just an evolution on React. It's not revolutionary enough. This won't really change things. And it's like, you know, it doesn't do enough. It's not 10x better or whatever. And it's just like, sure, like what does 10x better even mean? And I think people are actually starting to understand that and this is why I always try to write articles, but maybe I'm not very clear, is the actual architectural impact and mechanical pieces that make Solid, and I guess different than React, are actually significant, actually fairly significant, to the point that like we're seeing a shift here. So like, I don't know. I leave that up to the historians. You know, like I'm not going to try and guess what 10x better means, but I mean it's a really good line to keep on saying when you want to like just like be like, I don't want to look at this right now, which is perfectly valid. Just do that next time someone's like, yeah, check out this library, and you're like, no, the one I need the next library I look at to be 10x better than the one I just looked at. There, like that's a really easy way to end the conversation. Yeah, I mean it's fine. He's playing at it sarcastically, right? Like I mean this is kind of the expectation. I, I didn't find it very funny from a lot of influencers early on. At this point, you get past that at a certain point. You're just like, yeah, you know, whatever. It was more that like people who actually believe it, but I mean it's fine. It's like enough is enough. I get it. But you just turn it off. Just dial down the headphones. Just ignore it. You don't have to. You know, like it's good that work is happening. You don't have to be so critical of it. It's fine. I think the tone of this has changed so much. People are starting to see the need for innovation. So it's so funny. In the last 2 years, there's been way less backlash. Like God, 2018, 2019 period. Whew, wow. Like the seethingness. Like people got like angry, like really angry. You know, it's like kind of funny almost. You're just like, wow, I didn't realize I could make someone so angry by, you know, spending my personal time trying to make something that could, you know, be valuable for someone. It's like, no. Yeah, no, Dom's position is awesome. Tricky part is like it'd be awesome like we could work together and do like stuff. Like, it's tricky. This is the thing that I've been navigating a lot recently with like Bling
Yeah,
and
sure.
Astro and stuff. It's like
Happening here.
there is going to be some converging and some team ups, and there's going to be some people working on almost the same stuff, but like independently because you know a few little decision point things, and this is all okay. Not, it's like there's two sides of the argument. On one side, there's this like fatigue, blah 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 thing, but on the other hand, it's like you know, there's like you could go too far the other way, right? Like sometimes the web component stuff feels like that, where it's like, oh no, everything should be web components. It's like maybe not, you know, like you can be just as like restrictive on the other side of things. Like I guess I get that it's well meaning, but like it's good that there's different choices and different options. People still attack Tailwind, yeah, definitely. The noob tool that no one. Well, yeah, I mean, there's a long thing, and it's always the really experienced CSS people that tend like the old school guys who tend to not like Tailwind because CSS meant something very different for them, and CSS in itself is very very powerful if you like CSS. The problem is like I'm not sure everybody likes CSS, right? on the other hand, Tailwind
Okay,
keeps on going, and at a
so,
certain point, you're just kind of like,
so this is going to be a new
they kind of won. I
message.
mean, maybe that's React story. Maybe that's what's happened with React. To a certain degree, I think that is what happened with React. So reading up on the comments. Yeah, yeah. The performance is a fickle thing. You sell too hard on performance, and the next thing that comes out faster is going to threaten that a little bit. You know, I hope that people who did come for performance do notice that performance has DX inputs, not or like FX, not just UX. That's what I've been trying to. My last article was really trying to emphasize is because you can. And I actually wrote an article to that effect a few years ago, comparing solid. I called it the Tesla of JavaScript frameworks, which is pretty bold, I'd say. But what I was saying is that like when you talk about performance in terms of efficiency, you can always reverse the equation a little bit, right? Like if you look at like the value of electric cars being, you know, saving on gas and being more efficient in a certain way, then it's logical that performance could also be like they're two sides of the same coin, right? Being efficient can actually be a developer experience benefit too. And I don't just mean like build times. I mean literally because performance stops being the focal point depending how things are architectured, it actually gives you more room to work with. Like if your library is small, you're not penny counting on every single, you know, other third party library you can use. You know, that's just like an obvious one, but you can extend that really to anything. It just gives you more room to work with. Yeah, I mean, at this point, I'm actually really glad that React has taken on this thing. They used to say that they weren't a reactive framework. They now say that they have their own reactivity, and I think this is the way healthier thing. I wrote an article about this also. Of course, I wrote an article about a lot of things, but it was called like, "Is React truly reactive?" And the funny thing is, like, Swix had written something a couple years earlier that said like React isn't really reactive because the core team guys had basically told him that, and he kind of explained the difference with push and all that kind of stuff. But then I wrote my article and I was just like, this is such a stupid distinction when like Svelte's reactive yet React isn't. It's like kind of the same thing, you know, like I explained earlier. I mean, there's differences, but like my point is like the distinctions on the reactivity thing is like we're all reactive. I feel partially that the change in positioning on React to admit this is showing, and it's not because of this recent signal push. They're repositioning themselves, possibly because of the way Svelte did, to kind of like tie into that same kind of idea of what the idea of reactivity imbues in people. Where for the longest time they actually were strictly like we're not like purely reactive, or we're not like reactive like that, because that was the differentiating thing. There's conversation. I pulled it up on the thread. There's some TC39 people talking about a DOM tried to propose something. It did hit a bit of a wall. I don't think I'll find it right now, but I remember like there's a lot of people who are like JavaScript's not a control flow language, but there's enough people to still push at it that I wouldn't be surprised if a proposal shows up. It was just really funny. I remember Brendan Ike himself responded to DOM and was basically like no. And when I talked about this in a previous stream, but when Brendan Ike comes in and says no, you're like, okay, you know, like that's pretty big. Uh, the, the Nissan Leaf. I don't. Uh, or maybe that's Svelte. No, I don't know. Like, it depends what you mean by the Nissan Leaf, because like, yeah. But I think you're talking about from a performance standpoint. But if you look at like the Nissan Leaf, it's actually like efficient and small. Like yeah. I don't know if there's like that would be like building for size rather than speed, but on the same vector. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. I'm just trying to think. Yeah, just catching up. Sorry, React wasn't reactive because they didn't want to be associated with RxJS. Yeah, same reason why I didn't go with observable. It's funny because I didn't know. Like I kind of knew about Elm, but I was just like, yeah, but it was kind of to the side. And I was using SJS, and so I knew about Signal. But I was like, this wasn't a common term, and it was way more common to call them observables. But RxJS like pushed me from that. I was like, no, not doing observable. Metaframers eventually start working on more background features that are more common things with background grounds. Kind of, maybe not. I mean, here's the thing. I don't know if you saw Netlify and Vercel both support cron jobs. So they're setting stuff up to be serverless. So what you're going to see is, I think you're going to see the infrastructure allow for the decoupling of these kind of background things, like into services that are easily consumed from these JavaScript meta frameworks. I think that's a better way of putting it. Like, the thing is, if you take Solid Start or SvelteKit or Remix or whatever, we're kind of like an Express server. Like, we handle request responses, we have a middleware layer. If people made stuff on top of the middleware layer, we could have a lot of these things. It's kind of, you know what I mean? Like, I guess most middleware is around handling the web server side, and you're talking about other background processes. But like, yeah, I mean, maybe if it makes sense. There's a lot of interesting work being done in closing that gap on a service side, like stuff like Convex, which wants reactive databases and stuff. Like, I know, like, we have to be careful with some of these things. Like, these aren't all good ideas, like putting GraphQL between your database and your web server. That's not where it goes. But like, I think that
Okay, I think it kind of works.
Like, I do think it's going to be more on the infrastructure plays, like the Vercels and the Netlifys and the Cloudflares of the world. Now it's all just car comparisons. Ford is the F-150, or React is the Ford F-150. Self-follow you guys are just cracking me up. Yeah, this is something I've been thinking about recently. But only in the same way. You know how we were talking about Vue and Vue Vapor, and what that migration is like. I feel like we could play that game with React, and that's what I've been working on. Where it's like, you have a React app, you put solid components in it, right? I've made demos of this. I'd like to package it up. One of the challenges there is actually bundling. You need a platform where you can do that. And I know this doesn't work quite as I hope today, but maybe Astro could be that platform. What if you could build really nice... I realize like Next is somewhere else, and that's where people really want to be able to do it. But Vite, if we can build some kind of common base, I think there'd be a really interesting story about being able to do that. Like, obviously, it is definitely possible to do it and figure out how to get like maybe TurboPack or whatever to do these things. But I think we're going to see a lot of really cool stuff coming out of the work that Tanner with TanStack, myself, and Fred are doing in terms of tying it together. You have this agnostic platform, a place where meta frameworks, like I saw Brandon playing with some Astro stuff with Analog or whatever, I think, and some like the Bling stuff. We could see a bunch of the frameworks come together on kind of a common deployment layer thing. So like I was talking about explaining how we're all Express servers. What if we were all the same Express server? Like, if then it starts getting kind of interesting to be able to like tell these interop stories, because like maybe you have your content site in Astro and you use some React components with it, and then you migrate your Next app or React app into TanStack Start, which is a full React meta framework. You're doing that, and it's in the same setup with your Astro project, all using Astro core, same things. Use your React components in your content site, and then at a certain point you're like, I'm going to try some of these pages in Solid Start because I'm interested in that. And then maybe you use some solid components in your TanStack start app, because Astro can support both compilations, and then who knows? Like I think I think there might be a really cool story here. To take kind of that vision, and take it a lot further. I don't know. I'm suddenly more interested. Yeah, I'm so far behind you guys on stream. No, I'm 4 minutes behind. Okay, I'm not doing too bad. Oh man, sorry, I haven't like even moved this in front of me. This is a great Jace Phelps quote, but yeah, he's the one who triggered me on this. If you know, Jay Phelps worked on RxJS, and he's a big reactivity fan. Anyway, yeah, there's a lot of potential here. What's interesting to me is if we can figure out the right division of work, kind of like Veet was really good at figuring out. There's so much potential for everyone to win. Yep, yep. I mean, this is React is king. What else are we gonna do? Call it the metaverse? No, we're not calling it the metaverse. I know that's a joke, but
Okay, Upstash stuff, rate limit stuff.
oh, for the reactivity stuff, it wasn't actually proposal. Like literally, should we see if we can find it? Let's just like search on Dominic's True ADM profile, and go down. He was literally just on Twitter being like, "Hey, wouldn't this be cool if we could get this in JSX? Wouldn't this be cool if we could get a reactive primitive?" And then it's just like, no. I probably saved it at some point, but I don't trust my bookmarks. One thing I wish JSX had. Okay, so he's talking about putting executable blocks inside JSX. All this stuff takes me back to Marco. Like we talked about this kind of stuff. The reason this is nice is because like in something solid, you literally could nest like stuff in control flows, and I mean you could, yeah. It's just I always find my break my control flows. Yeah, da, da, da. Okay, that's not the one. Here we go. Bam. I know it's highly unlikely, but I wish there was a reactive form of binding in JavaScript as a primitive, like let bound x equals 1, and then let bound y equals 1, x equals 2, const log y. Basically, he's not even talking about effects yet. He's just talking about, like, can we have reactive state and derived state? I looked at this example and I was like, actually, I'm not sure if bounds make sense here. I think there's, like, some language things, but I got what he was getting at, right? Yeah, I mean, this was basically the Destiny operator, right? And yeah, it's far lower than the previous proposals around observables. He's like, well, he wanted to simplify it a bit, right? It wasn't too popular. I guess it still interests rated controversial points. And I obviously said like, hey, there's stuff, but what I say doesn't actually matter. Svelte's dollar sign, and he's like, yep, basically, yeah. Which again, Svelte's dollar sign is kind of the Destiny offer operator, if you understand it. You look at MobX. He's like, I know MobX, but he wants it in the language. Yep. See, this is the fun thing when you propose stuff. People, yep. Yeah, he's like, it's not that different except making a function. But there's a TypeScript difference here too. I think like they understand that it's a variable with a value. I would die for that. Wish I could say like, hey TypeScript, this function is like a variable. Like if we could just get that, so much stuff. Yeah, we tried Svelte. Yeah, it's so funny. He's literally like like people would just keep on telling him to try Svelte, and it's like no. Here we go. Brendan Ike, welcome to the stage. JS is not a data flow language, but you can use getter and setters to do this on an object container. I get that, but there's actually far more involved when you treat this as a first class binding. For one, it handles the age old problem of ordered dependencies inside and out, which are generally problematic or incorrectly handled. Yes. Yes, 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 yes. TC39 might take this up, but I doubt it'll go far quickly. Would need a champion who can do it. He did tag some people. Um, That's good to know. To be honest, I've been aware of previous pushback around reactivity at T79. I think there's still something worth pursuing. Yeah, anyways. So, to be fair, Bren didn't completely say no. But he was just basically like, kind of like no.
Okay,
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is if they brought into the language, now they're responsible for like or like browser vendors are responsible for like the debugging experience, right? Like, but I mean, it's kind of fine. Remember async await? That took a while to actually get good debugging. Where you had that like continuation of context. So long, initially async await came out, and you basically were kind of on your own. Um, oh, oh, here's another one too. Let me see if I can grab that one. That looks like it's from Alexis. Also, thank you, Code Monument. Gifted a tier 1 sub. Thank you. Sorry, just catching up on that. That was probably like hours ago. Let me see if I can see this one. I think this was the work that Joe Pio was working on. He also solid community member. Yeah, I mean, this is the problem. We bike shed on this stuff like all day long. This looks like the labels proposal. This is why I enjoyed writing that Svelte script, or sorry, reactive script article, because I actually think that there's a finite number of categories of solutions that you can do to solve it here. Like, there isn't actually that many options, so that we probably could list them all and compare them and talk about them. It's interesting to me. Like each time you see the different things, like yeah. Anyway, I think types are probably the most interesting. I guess a keyword would kind of accomplish that, but it's interesting when you start talking about composition, what that means. Like if you have a function that returns something reactive, and you put this here, does that mean that the whole function invocation's tracked, or does that mean it returns a reactive variable? You almost need it built into the language, like the type system, to actually know that this function returns a reactive variable. Sorry, I'm probably getting like a little bit too. All right.
Okay, I need to add some environmental variables. So I'll be back.
TC39 has a proposal for RX style observables. There's a proposal for object.observe that actually got pretty far before. I promise whatever gets added soon. Yeah, this is kind of the funny part about this and the standard stuff. It's usually because you have to compromise and like weigh everything out that like in the end, like sometimes the ergonomics don't matter, so you're gonna wrap over it anyways. But like usually it's like a lot of the bike shedding is about like API, and TC39 doesn't care about your developer ergonomics as much as like being correct, which is a good thing. But it's interesting because like when it does happen, people would be like I don't like how it looks or something, like something really silly. Yeah, it's standards are hard. I'm not making light of that. But it's also, I mean, I would say that too. The JavaScript framework people kind of just largely just go, yeah, if you build something useful, or we'll give our feedback. But then we're like, we're not going to stop us from building what we're doing. But this is where a lot of that tension comes in, because they kind of like go off on their own, and people are like, why aren't you adhering to the standards? Blah blah blah. And it's like, there's could be a lot of answers to that. All right. So I have caught up on Twitch chat now and YouTube chat. So we're actually doing okay. You guys have started to slow down. I thought I would never catch up. Yeah, I mean, yeah. We're at 3 hours and 40 minutes on a stream that basically had no content before it started, and I just spoke off the top of my head. I think we're like I could finish up soon here, honestly. Um, I've covered what I wanted to today. I've said today would be a shorter stream. Um, yeah, I mean, if I'm not going to get many more questions here, and I think we're kind of winding down. I unless there's like something that I missed that I think someone wanted me to look at a different reactive library. Maybe we can do that for a minute. Yeah, what was it? What was the reactive library? I think someone people kept on telling me about something like Signia or something. Signia. Excuse me. Yeah, TL draw Signia. Signals library for TypeScript. There you go. Check the docs. I love how they're now being branded as Signals libraries. This is awesome. Framework agnostic. Okay, so this is a state library. So perspective wise, what we're comparing it to here.
Okay, I need to work on some CSS now, and I think it's ready to be published.
Independent, like rather into like what Solid's doing. This is a state library. Okay. What are signals? What are signals? The value change of time trigger side effects. The funny thing is, I think a lot of things are going to be called signals these days. That no, I mean, this sounds like my rhetoric. Yeah, okay, so we're in agreement here. Derived state exclusively. Okay, that's good. So a lot of my biggest concern here on the stuff is I think some libraries are gonna skip over this, and it's the most important part. Like, like if you just have state and you have effects, and then you use effects to write back to other state, you're back in knockout zone again. You're not actually have the signals. Like if your library doesn't have a computed or a memo or something, you aren't really like you're very much in danger of like you could do stuff with it and like get the fine grained updates, but you're very much in danger of like losing the guarantees. Maybe even 10. Oh, you mean 10 years, not 10 libraries. I thought you were making fun of the fact. Okay. I hope so, but I mean, it's hard to say. I get in some gray zones when talking around that. Like, to me, imperative code is code that, like, runs top down, but it's like, it's a little bit challenging because all code actually runs top down. And, like, control flow can be seen as imperative or declarative depend on like how it's used. So yeah, it's a little bit challenging distinction. It's still worth something. Some things like you can still like it's almost like a meter. You can still like use it as a way of like saying something is more on the declarative side or not. Well, I think that what they mean by declarative is sort of like my code looks more like this and less like this. Uh, Declarative data generally is like every variable is a const. Do you know what I mean? Like, but I mean this is a very yeah, I don't know. Like that's not even completely true. I'm not. How do you guys distract me on talking about something completely inane like that? Sorry, let's get back to this. Use state, show completed, to news. Okay, sorry, this is a React example. Okay, blah blah blah. They're showing the fact that it literally re-renders everything. They explain the pull library. I mean, so far this looks like a typical reactive library. Yeah, yeah, okay. I think that's the most. You know, the most interesting thing about creating an agnostic reactive library right now, or agnostic signals library your target is probably like React. Like, are you going to use an agnostic reactive library in Solid or Preact or Quick or Vue or Angular? It's funny. I, this is just gonna put it out there. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I do know, but Jo- this is what I'm talking about. Like, I usually don't consider Jotai recoil signals libraries, but part of it is because of the way they interact with React and probably less of themselves. Because it starts getting into a very gray place where like the yeah, honestly, it's probably this yeah, I Recoil and MobX classically have had a very, very different way they interact with React. MobX wrapped parts of your React code, maybe components, in observers, and then it's a tracking scope. It's like making a create effect around it, but it's more complicated because you have to get React to do the re-rendering instead of MobX. I forget if I explained how to do that on one of my streams. It's actually really complicated. I think it might have done on the React stream. I did a React Solid stream where I was talking about how you can make React and Solid work together, and I showed how I made a version of state management for React. Like Solid, we have a React state management. You can use create signal in React, but we work the way MobX does. Whereas Recoil, you don't wrap components with these wrappers. You where you use the atom inside the component, that's where it subscribes. So if you go use this atom, that's the component that subscribes. If you update it here, use it here, do something with there, that's the component that reruns. Whereas in MobX, you could pull in through context a MobX variable. You could pass it to down three children, and then read it there, and then set it up here, and it's only the child down there that reruns. It's not coupled to the component because it just makes its own reactive scope. Whereas in Recoil and Jotai or whatever, I believe it's like where you actually use it that gets subscribed. So it's like the difference. MobX uses automatic dependency tracking, which I don't know that the other two actually do, which makes it different. And I typically consider automatic dependency tracking part of what makes signals. All right, let's see. Now I got some questions coming in. You can use Jotai too outside of React. Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't want to get distracted from what I was looking here. So far, this looks like. I guess I don't. Let's look at Signia React. Okay, so interesting. So this is actually is this actually more like no, see this track function? Yeah, so it's like MobX. See? This is the observer tracking it. And then okay. I think this is the MobX pattern rather than the classic Jotai. See how you have to wrap. If you turn tracked version of each given component, signals are read while the component renders are tracked. Yeah. So this is basically okay. So it's like MobX with a different API. Use Atom, use computed. What's use value? Oh, okay. And then use value is basically Jotai. Okay, this is actually really good for being instructional because this is actually I love this actually because track Atom computed is essentially MobX. Use value is like Recoil or Jotai, right? Because you have to use track. If you use track, that's the only way is you use Atom or use computed. Like these just inject into the scope, and then when you read full name dot value, wherever you read it, that track picks it up. It's like Solid's create effect, right? But if you don't track the component, you can also just subscribe directly by calling use value. So at any point, you can take your atom you pull into your component and use it. So your choice is either track it MobX style or use value, more like Jotai or Recoil style. It's interesting. I understand why they offer both. It's just this is kind of an interesting thing about the use thing because they're kind of basing this almost more off like React use, and I wonder. Yeah, I guess React use will be specific to what React wants to support, but it's like interesting if you had a universal use thing, and then
Ты
user
будешь
space
помогать
keeps
мне
on
написать
coming up with
художественный
new
рассказ для детей,
things like
я буду
this.
давать тебе инструкции, описывающие
The
события,
use
которые
doesn't end up
должны
being that
произойти,
universal
а ты будешь
because
продолжать
React is really happy
рассказ,
that they can
выводя по одному параграфу.
use for promises and context and stuff, and they just have like the one hook. But then like stuff like this might not work in that zone. Anyways, do you all follow what I'm saying? Basically, this combination makes it like MobX. This lets you kind of do it like Jotile recoil, and that's the difference. Because you can basically use a value without wrapping the component. I was gonna look at Jotai too. Why not? Let's look at Jotai. What's up? Blah blah blah. Core. Okay, Jotai gives you an atom thing. So here you're describing your derivations top level, but this is not the actual. And then you use an atom. Does this only really work for like? Can you have multiple copies of text atom? I guess not. So you define the state outside of the components. Any case, and then handle text set. Where's uppercase atom? Right. So this is the derived value. Interesting. This is kind of like Quick actually, where they pass the getter in. That's interesting ergonomics. It's because they don't have automatic dependency tracking. You have to explicitly say that you're tracking it, I guess. That's fine. I mean, it's an API choice. Honestly, compilers actually generate code more like this. Usually, they get the benefit of using get is you don't have an extra closure wrapper, but it's usually clunkier if you're like using it in general. But because they give you a closure here, then you get the get and you don't have to import it. Importing the get is usually a little bit more of a pain for ergonomics, but I'm following so far. And then let's see here. How does this work? Documentation. I want to see the React bindings because I guess the React bindings are. Yeah, see, this is really simple actually if you think about it. This is why the library is so small, right? Because like basically this part's universal, so you can define some state and derive state, and it knows how to wire this for you, right? And then this subscribes. This is use value in the other library. Done. So the thing is, the expectation of if you are going to use Jotai in your library, this is one of those interesting ones. The expectation is that you're going to be able to have to write your own use atom or way of subscribing to your component. This is actually why Jotai has never made it into Solid, I don't think, because people have made like Jotai-esque APIs around Solid's primitives, but like it's funny. We actually have a version of Solid where you can actually use other, like we have a feature where you can actually use other reactive libraries. Like you can use MobX and have it track in Solid without wrappers. If you set it as an external source, and then you can just use MobX as is in Solid without changing anything, which is really, really cool feature. Jotai is not compatible with that because it doesn't have the same kind of auto tracking mechanism. And the tricky part with Solid or Jotai is expecting something here to subscribe. I think, like it's like there's a component to subscribe to or something. Whereas like if you have no component, what do you wire the Jotai to? You have to like make a signal, and then you'd have to convert the actual signal, like these, into signals so that you could actually read them and actually get the tracking to happen. So basically, it basically does nothing. So yeah, this is interesting. I guess it's framework agnostic for libraries whose components re-render is basically probably what I'm getting here, which makes sense because almost every framework's components re-render. So Okay, so how are we doing? How is solid start changing? I heard you talk last week. I didn't clear what it meant. Oh no, no, okay. Sorry. Did I not talk about this again last week? Was it? No, I didn't. Maybe I talked a little bit. Sorry, I can make this really clear. Again, two different projects just sitting stand by side. TanStack framework is a React framework. Solid Start is a Solid framework. We're talking about both sharing the same core in Astro. We're extracting Solid server functions into something called Bling, which can be used. So we're just working together on the shared parts, and Tanner's going to help me with the types on the router. And essentially, it's a React framework and a Solid framework built on the same foundation. That's pretty much all there is to it, right? So it's like it's interesting because the shared stuff is sitting now underneath this TanStack brand, but it's just our stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like, don't get me wrong, like Tanner's doing a lot of work and like that, but I mean, it's just like it's not migrating to TanStack. This stuff doesn't exist essentially. Like we're like Nikhil and Tanner are working really hard together to make an agnostic baseline. So it's more like, yeah, I don't know. I'm hoping that makes sense. Like literally the why this is always confusing is because TanStack stuff is all agnostic. This one isn't. Is the way to put it. Okay. Yeah, I'll bite. This is an interesting question. My gut is no, but let me explain a bit. This is why RX is, I don't call RX fine grained reactive, although you could do it that way. Like I built something like Solid using RX. It's just like it's kind of like I even feel maybe this is why Elm got away from signals. It's just like the flow in cycle. The whole point of it is that like you keep all the side effects outside the system, and you just have like a very let me pull up Cycle.js for people who don't know. Okay, let's see here. Let's go to read the docs. There's an example. Like they're just building a big pipe. So like the sources coming in are streams. The thing coming out is streams. So like you could do some finer grained stuff instead of just calling combine latest here, I guess. But like I'm maybe getting the weeds, most people like I don't care about your silly functional FRP JavaScript framework that hasn't been that popular in the last couple of years. But like, okay, sure. I think what you could do is take the input sources, map them to signals. It's really hard because it depends on how you make the driver here. Because this RX Cycle likes like that the fact that it's like that purity stream. The same thing that React does. Like they wouldn't do this on their own because they don't like want to.
This is so funny. Basically, Copilot translated the stuff that was there in Russian, and it just translated it to English. So I figured what's happening. This is cool, actually.
RX sources like stream still to other component. I think it's a mess, honestly. Can you? Yeah. We have a universal render. I have a stream about that, where I have two streams. I have one where Nikhil shows us how he made React 3 Fiber, React Ink, and React or PDF and Solid. So I guess it's Solid 3, Solid Ink, and Solid PDF. I actually have a stream where I actually make the universal renderer into the DOM, like a really quick DOM
I want you to
renderer,
act as a
and then run it
storyteller.
through the
You
JS
are going.
framework benchmark. And it actually did pretty good. I mean, things have shifted around now, but at the time it scored the universal renderer was slower than Solid, but it was as fast as Inferno. So, yeah.
What? How was it sending me the
Yeah, it's really tricky to find like there's only a couple of us working on stuff, and I'm probably a bit of the bottleneck right now. The PRs coming in right now are really great. We just need to. This is why we're doing this move and stuff with Astro. I want to help streamline us being able to actually deliver on it. It's hard with a small team of volunteers to manage the meta framework. Almost all the meta frameworks have a company behind them, like multiple people. All right, still reading. I mean, convenience at the time. This the next version, like the in the future, these will be separate. I did a stream with Milo where you kind of hinted at it. You can like we have a different reactive system that we're working on towards for future Solid, and it's Act Solid.js slash reactivity. So I just didn't bother because I'm a skeptic of agnostic solutions a little bit. Like I just mentioned, if I made an agnostic Solid like reactive library, where would you use it? Um, I already made one for React, so I thought that was like good enough, like React Solid State. The truth of the matter is, like,
I
I thought
can
the solid
help it.
package was small
Wow.
enough that I was just like, whatever. It's like 6 kilobytes.
This is stupid.
Like your bundler's not going to pull the other code in anyways. So like, if you really want to use solid, just use solid.js, and like you can use it. Like you just use the package as is as the reactivity library, and not really worry about it. But yeah, mostly that I set this up before that was like a trend, like before Vue did it, before others are starting to do this pre-act and whatnot. There's a solid Jota. Of course. I mean, there we go. So it can be done. Actually, you know what? I'm curious. Are you curious? I'm curious. What does a solid Jotai library look like? Okay. I like the API. See? Told you. They call count as a function because it's so all this is an API wrapper. Let's a primitive like based on Jotai. What is okay? Let's see what a use atom does. Use atom value, set atom value. That's fine. Where's this coming from?
I think it's coming from maybe from Jedi itself.
Okay.
No.
Use atom value. Okay. Interesting. So they have to map to resources for stores. Otherwise,
Yeah, because atoms could be async.
oh, cool. Okay, so they're actually using, they're actually using, my approach to, basically it's a signal interface with a proxy in it. They've kind of unified it. So you call as a function, and then everything underneath it, it's deep proxies, and then they use a resource if it's a promise. Otherwise, they just create a signal out of it. Okay. And then the store on submission writes to the signal. Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. Okay.
Yeah, Jedi when you
So like what it does is it provides a slightly more universal API that aligns with Jotai's way, but generally speaking, you're just creating signals. Like you could almost just create signal out here, but there's like it handles a few other cases as well. Okay, that makes sense. What's the best way for sharing state with signals? I don't quite understand what the question is. Sharing state with signals. Maybe like talking about like nested reactivity in stores. I'm not sure.
Your room was full. Oh, okay.
Can we send a signal from cells back? Right now, only resources do that, and only like during render. We're not doing like WebSockets or something. Like generally speaking, though, when you're doing SSR and you create resources, we serialize the promise, and it wakes up when the same resources, hydrated in the client. Yeah, sorry, just reading through. I'm only catching up on all the Cycle.js talk now.
There should be some state.
I did address this before, but really simply, they
She
aren't
opened the
any
door.
different. Like MobX and signals are the exact same thing. It's not MobX's fault; it's React's fault. If you want to say like about the difference, it's like essentially like it's not the reactivity is the same. It's the way you use it that's different. That's where all the confusion comes in. MobX is a fine-grained reactive library. React is not a fine-grained reactive renderer. Whether I say that's a problem, blame React, but I mean like I'm just like that. It's perfectly fine, is what I'm getting at. It's like the hype though is about the renderer. Funnily enough, not about the actual reactivity.
How many requests? Okay, that's good. I mean, it's a bit silly on dev, but
CRD2. Sorry, are you guys like talking about like WebSockets and stuff, or like we like you got like 4 editors open and they're all talking to each other and they stay in sync? I think the coolest thing. Sorry, let me. Did I miss any APIs on the Signia thing? We kind of got distracted. This all makes sense. How about the core libraries? Okay, there's more here. Okay. Atom computed React, which I'm getting the effect with the reactor, thin layer, effect scheduler, fair enough, transact. Like transact does not create a new transaction. Transactions, okay, this is an interesting idea. Okay, set, throw a new error.
okay. I just
okay,
wonder
cool.
where
Okay,
we're going to hit the limit.
interesting. And there's a rollback. Okay, cool. Yeah, we don't have anything like this. This is an interesting addition. When I say don't have anything like this, I'm lying. Technically, transitions are kind of like this. The mechanism that we use for doing
to be less
for doing like concurrent rendering, where you kind of like start something off on the side and then do this, and it's basically when you commit the async stuff that everything merges. So like we have a bit of this, but nothing as far as having rollbacks or what that's. So it's funny. I copied transition because of React naming.
Okay.
But transaction is a much better name for what transitions are. But yeah, this looks like this is interesting.
Under 2,000.
I think this.
So far.
Okay, yeah, because I was like looking at this, I'm like, yeah, so it's MobX. No, this is the interesting piece here. They have a model for committing and like not for batching so much, but for like making sure everything goes together and then committing it together. Right? Does this handle async? Because if it's synchronous, if it's synchronous, it's less interesting. Because like, I mean, it's kind of like Solid's old version of Solid's batch command, which didn't commit the didn't write to the signals
So
till
what do
the
we
end,
get in
and
the
then
console?
it wasn't particularly useful. This must
So
support,
it's 500 in the
because I have
request.
to imagine that all
What
these could
does
apply at the
server
same time.
return?
Yeah, this is the piece that probably is worth looking into. I have to imagine this is actually
God
the
promise.
thing, because
Okay.
like Solid had a batch command for a long time that basically would run everything. We still batch, but we went with what the batch command did was it wouldn't set the signals until the end. So in theory, yes, if you threw, then you would get this behavior. But as I said, wasn't a very common scenario. Async is the only reason why this matters, because otherwise you're in synchronous mode, and I don't know that.
Yeah, what's
Does
there?
this has to does this support async transitions? Is that the trick?
I don't know why numbers are the right ones, but I'm just guessing that.
Yeah, I mean, however you want. Signals aren't really worried about that. Like if you set up some WebSocket, or you played with like some kind of local storage mechanism that triggered. Like I said, that's more multi-window. But yeah, like set up some WebSockets. However you serialize that. Like signals themselves are not concerned with that. They're the synchronous piece, right? It's like that's why like Angular doesn't see them contradicting with like RxJS, because you pipe out everything through Rx, and then they end up in signals, and the signals like make sure everything is synchronous. So whatever mechanism you use for that is kind of like it's outside of the responsibility. No, but this is an interesting thing. The dev tools, I'm not. The dev tools kind of do this because there's a root. So actually, as long as we have the roots, then yes, technically yes, we can do this. This is what the dev tools do. I don't expose it to the end user. I've been thinking about this a lot for problems like HMR and like resumability. So technically, yes, this is where we're heading towards. But right now, it's not really refined. But technically, because we have the roots and we have the dependencies, we basically have the whole graph. Oh yeah. We have a method called reconcile. For our stores. Yeah. So basically, yes. At that point, when you're getting fresh data, you got to do diffing. Obviously, it's better if you send patched updates. That's better for everyone. You send less over the wire. You send less to the browser. You do less work. Like it's win. But obviously, that's not always the case. So we have a reconcile function with our stores. It's in our tutorial where I show how you can use Solid with an immutable interface like Redux. Same idea. It basically. Do I have the Redux example with immutable stores? Yeah, like solve this one. Essentially, if I go into the store here, that's a Redux store with some reducers. My use Redux hook takes our store, passes it through reconcile on the state, and what this will do is a data diff, and then the updates will flow out to Solid. Stores are nested proxies. It'll just be the properties that change. So like essentially load data from the server, get the big JSON, diff it. Notice that the one street name number on that one user changes. That street name updates pinpoint to that place in the DOM where you're showing that street name.
Help to get response. Maximum content is 4,000 tokens. Your message resulted in.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's kind of out of scope. Like you could really use any solution. Like we wouldn't really have any opinion about what you do there, right? Like I think the idea of transactions in async sense is interesting. Maybe that helped, but like yeah, like the core library wouldn't really have it. Like I don't even know what those primitives would look like because it's like yeah, it seems a little bit like we have from, so we can convert to streams. If there's like maybe a simpler interface with sockets, but I feel like sockets you have to like do a dance anyways, so like it feels like a third party library.
Okay, so let's go back to
yeah. So this is like Solid's old batch. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
go back to CSSing this a bit.
I've seen it a bit. Solid primitives is the one that that the core team guys have been, or the people like David and like the debug people are doing, which is a kind of similar thing. But I'll check out it again. Like it has like all of these primitives. Let me try solid use. Is it like a straight port of view use maybe? Oh, it's Alexis's library. Oh, he's still updating it. I didn't realize that. I thought this was kind of like what's solid use? Sorry, maybe am I wrong? Okay, yeah. I guess these are just things that he wanted himself. Okay, that's cool. So it's a similar type of library, some of these kind of patterns that he likes. See, this is the whole thing. You have primitives. People can go do this. This is the power of composition, right? Yeah, and to be fair, I was really anal about performance testing this early on. I wanted to make sure that we were as fast as any VDOM library. So I like all the benchmarks, like the really nasty ones like dbmon, where you're like splattering the screen and all that kind of stuff. I made sure that the reconcile function could keep up with Inferno. So like it's not our forte by far, but Solid's reconcile is about as fast as the fastest VDOM libraries. So yeah, it's good. But what's cool about Solid is like when you don't need that, like then you get the like this is kind of like the defaulting to the worst case scenario.
Great stuff.
You're asking when the dev tools are going to come into start? Yeah, I'm not sure. We don't even have the linter in start yet. Yeah, honestly, like at this point, the type of stuff I'm looking at is way more mechanical than that. Like just bug fixes, like so many. Twitch. Did I miss a sub? Code Monument gifted a tier 1 sub to Ansi. They've gifted 3 subs in the channel. Thank you very much, Code Monument. Yeah, another one to Arshig. Yeah, honestly, thank you. Wesley Coder gifted to Dev. Oh, and Parasocial. Thank you very much. That's awesome. Having the people in the chat who are always engaging, keeping stuff going, have subs. I very much appreciate you guys doing that. All right, cool. Sorry, I don't always see the subs, so I appreciate that.
Okay. I don't think we need any of that stuff.
No, I missed that whole conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this is the scariest thing when you talk about benchmarks, and then like you invite the scrutiny, and then you find yourself like having to debug someone else's benchmark and stuff. Yeah, no, I have like 55 notifications right now on Twitter. I am not. I'm probably gonna not look at them till after the stream.
Okay, so John Doe.
Yeah.
Is
yeah, I don't know. Maybe some stuff I said on stream got some people talking. I like the thing is like I can only know what I've measured and tested. The truth of the matter is, I'm sure I heard a story once that Inferno helped some startup costs, but didn't make any significant impact on the performance of Facebook. I don't know if that says about Facebook or if that says about Inferno, but that's the challenge with benchmarks. I'm just kind of contending the fact that like we've done an incredible amount of work to reduce memory on signals and using techniques for improved creation costs that we're basically at a place where like there's significant, like, I can't speak to every benchmark, but like any benchmark that I've ever seen. So it's like it's tricky, and I look at lots of benchmarks. But I mean, the problem is there's a bias there because if you see benchmarks, you build towards the benchmarks, you might not be hitting the real cases. So it's you know what I mean? Like, I should check that out probably when stream's over. Right. What I was referring to is like if you look at the JS framework benchmark, like, and you look at the history of the JS framework benchmark, and I know I did this in a previous stream here, but just yeah, where is it? The official results page. From 58, which is the first version that had surplus in it. If I go here, and you're just gonna go, let's jump a few versions, 69. If you just go through the history of this, and this has large creations and stuff. Like here's DOM-C, which is something else. We have surplus and solid side by side, right? Or actually, I guess this is the first one where solid got ahead of surplus. Like we all the way to Chrome 110. You know, years and years later, you're gonna see the same trend. See, now we have like all these other libraries and that are like all flagged. Let's remove the flagged ones. You know, actually Xenia is a different case, but like what I'm getting at, I mean, these are VDOM libraries, by the way. They're fast. I'm just saying like solid and these things, it's not any slower is what I'm getting at. Right? Right. And obviously these are stupid tests where you're creating, you know, 10,000 rows, and we're talking about the difference between solid at 441 and in what is that, block DOM at 447 and Inferno at 451. It's 5 milliseconds. Like, who cares? But what I'm getting at is like it's not. I did a test where I actually scaled up the components years ago too. Was it fastest way to render the DOM? And again, these are artificial tests, but like, you know, so now there's like we're you know, like this is just silliness, but like it's not like it's like drastic, like anyone's like drastically worse here. Like actually DOM-C is really fast. Where's EV 1682? Like yeah, you know what I mean? Like yeah, I'll look into it later. I'm sure I'm always looking for an opportunity to learn and do better. So yeah, and we've already hit that equilibrium years ago. That's the thing. Shimi is the most important thing. Ours are more power suffering. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's all good, you know? yeah, and this is what I freaking struggle with every single day stream. You hear this, and I'm not just talking about like, it's like when you're sitting there and you're like, man, are server components the right direction? Are we like, have we convinced ourselves that we need to converge everything in a direction that doesn't need to be converged, or should we look at specialization? It's not always that easy to know when the right time to put things together or keep them apart is, and it's like certain decisions will definitely like have you stuck in a little rut, so to speak, where you have to actually kind of go back to pop out of it. Like, I mean, single page apps you can view kind of like that. I think if someone said that single page apps were like a local maxima kind of thing, as they are today, that might be a fair thing. But then you can go, okay, well, how do you get out of it? Quick is a way to get out of it. Server components are a way to get out of it. But like, those might be their own little directions that gonna get us stuck. All right. Writing a solid to next inflation maximum. Yeah, I mean, Yeah, I mean that's interesting. You'll see. Part of me suspects that that will not ever be my job. If I get solid start to where I want it to be, I'm hoping that it'll be the create JD apps of the world that do the Nuxt thing. Do you know what I mean? That put the finishing touches. You'd be able to use the power of the Vite Astro platform to do those finishing touches. Because I'm never going to be able to keep up with Nuxt. Never, ever, 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 ever. Like that's what they focus on, and I feel like they are also very good at that. I think the challenge is like there's different layers, and I hope that we get even somewhere near the polish that Nuxt has in a solid framework at some point in the not so distant future. Yeah. You're gonna cause a major. I'm not sure. We could talk about this, but I'm working on it. I've been. Hey, I'll put it out to you guys. 1.7 has been a tricky one for me because it's like it's kind of breaking for TypeScript. Like it's not breaking, and TypeScript always breaks, but it's put me in a kind of interesting dilemma where I need to figure out how much I want to like respect semantic versioning, even though TypeScript doesn't respect semantic versioning. And part of me kind of started thinking that like maybe we should just go for 2.0 early, do a bunch of the breaking, like minor breaking changes that I've been kind of hinting at, and then like leave the bigger like reactivity change to 3.0 later in the year. And we should just get in the habit of being able to do releases at a better interval. I know this is like I'm just throwing this out here. I've only talked about the core team with this, so here he goes. And this is kind of thing I'm talking about. I'm not talking about big breaking changes, and my idea would be like in that case, the 2.0 would have everything in a deprecated state, so it won't get removed yet. But basically serve as a transition period. That's sort of where my thinking is, right? Like I'm not talking about like big things. I'm talking about tertiary API type stuff, like details around like on error. How many of you use on error directly? Right? How many of you use what's another one like that? The once comment. Yeah. This is what I'm thinking. And it's funny because this was not my plan originally. I was going to kind of like, because I was looking at 1.7 and I was like, I can be kind of conservative here. But then I was like, after all these discussions with Dan and all this, and he kept on pointing at the linter like it was like the solid saving grace. And I was like, this is so weird to me because like literally it just never occurred to me that this was ever a problem. But you know what, to each their own. I started thinking, you know, the funny thing is 1.7 was about making TypeScript stricter. Like, you know how the linter complains? If you, like, let me show this. Let me go back. Okay, let's go result. If I go in here and I don't call this as a function, the linter complains. It goes, hey, I was thinking, like, my idea for 1.7 was actually get TypeScript to complain. And I started thinking, like, if I wanted to be like even more aggressive here, we could like add a few more rules essentially, which you know, and it's tricky to find the right balance between TypeScript and the linter, but like basically make solid a little bit stricter, and that was sort of where my thinking was, because I want to avoid errors, and I want to like that's I feel like this is an interesting kind of venture here where a lot of the confusion people feel with solid, I feel we can mitigate. I've just been very standoffish because I generally hate tools telling me what to do. Like I don't like them, and it's funny, but that's what we saw in the poll. Most people actually want the tools to tell them what to do. It's just not how I develop. It like irks me when I see that stuff, because like if there's ever if there's a false positive, I'll just like uninstall it. Like I'd rather like not get notified than like ever hit a false positive, which makes me kind of crazy. I understand that, but since most people aren't like that, it actually why Solid's design is kind of like it is. We could do a
This
lot
actually
better.
works in YouTube. It doesn't work in Beach for some reason.
Well, I mean, breaking
I want
TypeScript
you
is
to
in
act as
like
a storyteller.
people would have to go around their app and update TypeScript on some specific things. Like, yeah. So it's like, yeah, I'm wondering if I'm playing too much into these conversations and been pulled too into it. But after all of this, I was just like, if this is the world that people want, where they want their tooling always shouting at them, and I think I know this instinctually. It is. Swix wrote a great article about the shift left. What is it? Swix shift left or something. Where is it? It's not this Third Age article. Swix blog. Whatever,
Okay.
Swix.io. There we are.
It has like a dark and light mode.
Am I gonna find it though? Shift. Maybe he references in his Third Age article. He talks about the shift left, or that like all JavaScript frameworks are basically. Anyways, language server. That was the one. He wrote a blog where he was saying that language servers are the new JavaScript framework. That's what I'm looking for. Swix language server. Yeah, there we go. Bam. Okay. And the whole premise here is that we're moving stuff this way. So instead of getting, errors and run time or build time, commit time, save time, basically everything is going this way. React is actually very much on the runtime side. Some people are more interested in compilers,
Yeah, you need to read me as
and then going here. If you believe this is the case, then like this sort of strictness is kind of what people are asking you for. So it's a kind of different focus. I was viewing 2.0 as like the reactivity rewrite, but I'm thinking now of, and like kind of pushing forward that side. I'm thinking 2.0 is actually making Solid stricter and getting the docs to where they need to be for the new docs. So it's going to be a release about basically documentation and like making it more straightforward than ever to because like there's just something so huge for me, and I know the linter handles it, but this to error tells you you're not in Kansas anymore. Like this is actually really important that when the person comes in from React, they go do this and it goes, hey, that is not a function, because otherwise they don't know what they're supposed to do with their signals. Maybe Ryan mode. Yeah, exactly. You might have to give up the idea that Solid is something you should enjoy using. I know, that's a crazy, eh? But yeah, this is the trend, especially when like our debate basically ends when Dan's like, "Oh yeah, but you've got a linter or something." It's like to me, like that argument is so inane. I'm just like, like so what? But like, I guess it's not for a lot of people. Like I never use linting. I barely use TypeScript. It's just, yeah, I didn't think it would be. You guys are great. Keep me energized. I don't even know how I'm awake still. It's been such a long week. Yeah, that's true. It's yeah, you're right. Like the only reason that this doesn't slip under into 3.0, and the funny thing is we might be able to even pull this shiz off on the API side on 2.0, is that we're moving away. We're going view style. I'm going to tell you guys straight up there's two big API changes on the reactive side, and we probably should just pull off the band-aid right now. One is we're getting rid of batch. We're just gonna we're always gonna queue microtask. You're not gonna have to worry about batch. Batch is just not a thing. You just write your code, it just works. Done. The second thing is I'm pretty sure on this, but I'm willing to debate it with people. Stores are going to change from the path-based syntax to the produce immer style syntax by default. You'll still be able to do path, but the immer style is way less code. It works better with TypeScript, and yeah, if you want to delete a property, you just use delete in JavaScript or whatever. It's not fighting the stuff. I feel like if we do that, we can just create mutable down a ravine or wherever it wants to go die, and we have a really good solution with read-write segregation, control flows, great TypeScript, and we make those two kind of thing. But yeah, obviously all this other stuff, and I guess technically deprecate create computed, but I don't think anyone cares about that. But those. Though we do those changes, I think we're in a pretty happy place. 99% of your code is unaffected by those, right? It's just I think the stores will be like a refactor for a few people and things. I think the stores is probably the bigger one, right? Right. Writable resources might okay. You got me there. Our resources are writable. We have a mutate function, but you're hinting at the thing that I can't preemptively do is I suspect that when we're done the reactivity, and that might be later, like 3.0 time period or whatever, that the resource API will shift slightly, and this is a little long term kind of flag. This is why we just can't. I think we should just do the stuff that we can do now, and then just kind of go from there. One of the coolest things about primitives is that for the most part we can just put them in a repo and be like, oh, you want to use the old version of create store, well, we'll just export it from a different thing. So you can just install the old create store and it'll be built on the new create store, except it'll be we can give you the old API as a compat layer until you can migrate off it. That's the kind of thinking that I love with the primitives. All this stuff like batch might just have basically no ops and stuff, but this is sort of the thinking here. I kind of we have to decide how far we go on that side, but I think it's pretty clear the general direction here. Yes, there's still set store. I'm literally suggesting that well, actually, is it on here? Where are we? Okay. File, new window, file, open, recent, solid. Where is it? X reactivity. Example. I'm basically suggesting this. See? Store, set store. And this is a silly example because it's just, as you know, you can use getters and stores, right? Right. Create store, count, double count, right? And then in our root here, create effect, I'm just suggesting that set store always takes a function and that function gives you a mutable proxy. So it's, I mean, maybe you would write it more like this generally, but what's cool about this that I love is just little details. Like if I go do double count and I try and types, it just works nicer with TypeScript. You know what I mean? No, you can't write to a getter, it's just, I like my immutability, and we'll keep the path as an option, like reconcile is, but this is generally what the thinking is. Does that make sense? When you say queue task embedded, does that mean a single change marks dirty and the effects run on the next microtask? Yes, that's exactly what that means. The funny thing is it doesn't make sense to do that until we get the new reactivity, because then because then the lazy of the pull mechanism with the memos and everything makes way more sense. But yes, it just means the thing is it doesn't. This has very minimal impact for main flow. It means that though when you're in event handlers and you set like 10 things, it auto batches. That's all it is. Oh, my screen's frozen. Oh, that's lovely. Let me remove and add it again. Nope, still frozen. That's so weird, because I'm not frozen. Oh, do you know what it is? No. Oh, that's weird. Huh. I don't know why it was doing that. I was sharing my whole screen, but VS Code isn't showing up. Oh, that's interesting. Like on my window, I can see the VS Code window. That's so weird. Huh. Let me try and change my share one more time. I'm sorry about that. It's weird though, because I'm definitely sharing my whole screen. Maybe I wasn't.
You need to come up with some something on E.
Sorry about that. That description probably made no sense then. Sorry, let me see if I can show what I was talking about.
There's something on E.
Why is this not? There it is. Okay. Sorry. What I was saying is, it's like this. You still have a store. This example has like a count and a double count, and then like essentially the store always takes a function that passes the previous state. And what I was commenting on is like if you take the double count and you try and like it just the TypeScript works a lot nicer, because like you know what I mean. Like it'll be like, hey, can assign to that because it's a read-only property and stuff. It just there's can we delete s.count? The operand to delete it must be optional, right? Like I don't know. I think this is gonna make things, yeah. Okay, sorry, just catching up. All right. Yeah, produces more type state, but the path syntax had all the fun tricks of filtering with modifying. Yeah, the biggest problem with the path, and we still have the path, is that like there's inherent behaviors that are not obvious. Like objects always merge, which would screw people up if they were writing stuff a certain way. Like they wouldn't realize that they were merging instead of replacing, because they'd write like set store something something, and that second something would be an object which actually merged instead of replaced, because they didn't inline the object, right? And like undefined doing delete. So just quirks that you have to do to have that DSL work nicely, that like mess with perceptions and stuff on TypeScript and stuff. And while it's really compact to be like, I can iterate over this thing, you know, like filter function, like you can still, I don't know, s dot map dot whatever, you know what I mean? Like I think basically I said I was open to discussion on this. The path syntax will exist the way produce exists today, but I'm very much on this kind of thinking. Yeah, it's always hard to do this, because then you get into these APIs where you're hanging setters off the setters. Because like very much am like the whole reason this is still set store and not a separate proxy or the same proxy or whatever is because this part here is still really, really important. Yeah, other than it's not create mutable. Really, really important that this is not create mutable. I actually think this lets us get rid of create mutable for the most part. Yes.
Okay.
The funny thing is, yeah, I don't actually know what to call the variable because to me it's just the store state. I like if I often call it store or state. The reason it's S is for that reason. It's because it's not a draft in our case. It is actually just a mutable proxy. Right. So yeah. So you see the win here now is solid only has a single type of store. Right. So like this kind of streamlining is like the stuff that we're aiming for generally with the reactive rewrite. But I'm thinking that we have a middle ground with 2.0, which starts guiding us in the right direction, and then we, you know, we kind of do the actual like.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. You guys are right. If we change the API for 2.0, and we could actually replace the reactivity during the life cycle of it, if there isn't huge behavioral changes. Yes. Yeah. But yeah. But it will probably be replaced with another primitive. There's still a use case here, but yes.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, my point is, the three primitives I mentioned are other, like obviously the store change, and the store change and the what was the other one? The store change is probably the most impacting one that I'm talking, and the batch. Store and batch are things that are felt. The other stuff is probably generally not going to be. The other stuff is generally probably, yeah. As I said, it's the key thing here is that we those original versions of the primitives will be available for people, so they'll be able to like still like if do the quick. I mean, it'll be kind of annoying. You'll do the update, and then TypeScript will like yell at you that you're using a bunch of function methods that don't exist. If you don't want to go refactor your code, you'll just be able to like change the import. That's the kind of thinking that I'm thinking. Yeah. So, yeah. My thing here is I wonder if behavioral differences will be worth severing, but I guess we'll see. Yeah, a simple code mod to update imports. Yeah. That could do it. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. That's the kind of thinking that I'm having here. I don't want to pull our legacy around forever, and the kind of this is the beautiful thing about primitives, right? They're like, yeah. But yeah, so I think that's the thing. We're gonna do this stuff all in parallel, obviously, but I just the discussions this week made me really appreciate how even more so how much people really like the tooling assist, so to speak, and yeah, I want to make it so that people get into solid that their first impression is like much more guided, that they feel like they know if they're doing the right or wrong things, which, as I said, is not a quality that I actually have ever cared for that much, which is funny, but it's definitely something that I think is meeting people in the middle, so to speak. Anyway. All right, how are we doing here? I saw Theo came back for a minute. Do you not have Git on your machine? That'd be such a flex. I called it. You don't get to enjoy Solid anymore. No, I'm gonna still enjoy Solid. I'm gonna enjoy the fact that people enjoy using it. I think I think I think that like I think this is a good step. I think there's some other cool stuff that I had flagged for 1.7 that will be coming out too, which is like the type safe control flow. Um, so that like your show components don't aren't keyed and are type safe. Like they do the proper uh, narrowing if you use a callback form. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I'm never probably gonna use the callback form and just put exclamation marks because I just don't care enough. But now you can do that. So yeah, I mean this is where we're heading, right? Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything else that I think that's my biggest thing. In the same way that Dan kind of had that realization, perhaps that like people look at React hooks and see reactive libraries, which he apparently didn't realize. I had the kind of realization that people don't actually mind stuff complaining at them nearly as much. Like even if like the rules seem weird, they'll just go along with it. Which actually, if that's the conclusion, that is very positive for Quick's future. Um, that was the part I think that was always going to think because I was like, why do I want weird rules and everything complaining at me, kind of stuff. But like, if we're okay with just like doing a small code refactor and then it's like things erroring at you, going, oh no, now this isn't serializable, blah blah blah, and you like if that's the kind of world you want to live in, and it gets you optimal code, and you're fine as long as things keep on like complaining at you. I think that actually speaks well to these crazier compiler futures. Like this is how we get there. Right? Like, I, I mean, it's funny. Like, actually, oh, can I find this on Twitter? Dan said something that I wasn't expected because I was talking to him about the linting, and I was just like, yeah, whatever, linter. And he was like, in the future, someone was bugging him about it. He's like, in the future, React will error, like straight up error, on stuff that they use on the linter today, like dependency arrays and stuff. Like his intention is like if you put an empty dependency array and it doesn't match, they will like straight up use the tooling to error on you. So he's like they're getting stricter and stricter too. That's their intention, which is really really interesting. Thinking back to TDD, that's exactly how so many people write code. What? But I didn't think anyone actually did TDD. I thought that was like the thing that you like talk about and you're like, this is the good way to do things, and then you write first test and then you just give up and you move on. Okay. Okay, fair enough. But yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying though from a mindset. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think the other place where I saw this, and I got to thank Greg for that, was when he taught me Rust. I started thinking about this a lot more too. Just like understanding how like kind of pushing code in a certain direction. It's very interesting to me in terms of trends because I was around when people were using like different variants of C and C plus, um, you know, and I saw that evolve into the Java um, and obviously like C sharp and .NET and stuff, and it was just and this like Ruby, like watching the advent of having these kind of strict object oriented languages and then the move to like more scripty type languages and then like even JavaScript kind of getting pulled into there, though JavaScript everyone knows is a complete mess. But like watching it come back around again is really interesting thing. And obviously TypeScript is an indicator of this, but like even more so, it's almost like the reason that we got away from all that typing stuff wasn't, and like all the crazy tooling, it wasn't because what it did was bad. It was just that we were too impatient to wait for it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I kind of bought into that it was bad. Like, I was just kind of like, you know, like give me a text editor and like Notepad or whatever, and like let me go. But I'm actually starting to think that it's more that like things are so slow and so bulky that it ended up being like prohibitive. Like I spent a lot of time in Visual Studios, not code, like original Visual Studios, like back in like I Visual Studios in 1997, dating myself. And like this is high school though, not like professional. And like and like I got it from a teacher for helping set up all the computers in the computer lab one summer, and I used like it's so weird when you in those environments. Like I remember like all the auto completion, like you never typed anything, everything was like one character. You just like do like look up API docs. Like it was just like a very different experience. It was never like let's just try it and see how it goes. It was just like it was like do tab. You know what I mean? And I kind of started liking flying blind after that period, because I felt that I was getting too distracted by like going through the list of possible completions and like doing that. I'm like probably the only person in the world who thought that, but like I don't know. It's very funny to me. Yeah, I mean, I think this is the thing, and luckily for us, we are structured in such a way that like there probably is a fairly idiomatic form to how you should do stuff so that we can do it. Like another idea that came in from the great Michael Rawlings is he was like, Ryan, you could just make a special untrack for components, right? And this isn't like a TypeScript kind of thing. Like this is still runtime error, but he was like, if you make a special, untrack for components, then if people, yeah, maybe I have to show this in the playground. But he was like, if people access a value top level and don't call untrack themselves, you just runtime error on them. So if they destructure props, error. If they like access a value out here, error, unless they explicitly untrack. So essentially, if you want to access the value, you have to intentionally call untrack on it. So components are untracked, but they're like a different special untrack. And I mean, that's a pretty radical move. But on the other hand, I mean, I guess linters help with this too. Like, but it's pretty powerful when the first time you go to destructure props, it's like you tried to access, you know, like you tried to access reactive properties in in a like something like, I don't know, untrack, but like in a top level component context, you know, don't do that. You know, if you intend to listen to an untracked, wrap it in an untracked call, something like that. Like it's funny though. See, to me that's a lot of friction for, because there's certain, I don't think I'm the only person in Wild West, but over time this is the kind of scenario. And the thing is, don't get me wrong, I'm only including that stuff in dev mode. Like, don't put stuff in my bundle, you know. But like, I'm just saying, like, this is sort of the create computed. No, I mean I'm talking about the component. Yeah, create component already on tracks. Yeah, but I'm saying actually I can't do much with like there could be compiler errors. I was talking runtime though. We could literally put have a special untrack. So when you're in the special untrack mode, so like basically if you listen to something in a timeout, it's not going to error. Or in an event handler, it's not going to error. Those are untracked contexts. It's not going to error. But it's just like specifically for components, if you top level access something, they're going to force you to untrack. Yeah. Do you follow what I mean? Compiler stuff would require being aware of what's a component, but that's where stuff's heading. Like, it's just interesting. Like, I'm less comfortable with the compiler thing because it requires you to know what a component is. I mean, yeah, I'm just throwing this out here to see what people think. Obviously I'm getting some positive feedback in the chat here, but this is kind of like the question, right? Like, what always bugs me about this stuff is inconsistency, right? Because sometimes you do want to access values in an untracked context. In fact, a lot of times you want to. So it is kind of interesting, like to special case the components and say like, no, components are the one place for untracked context that you can't track. You can't do that, you know? Right, exactly. Right, we'd have you now go the other way. You're like, no, you have to explicitly untrack it. With this untrack mode, you're forcing all values to be attached. No. I'm not doing that. It's still untracked. I'm forcing you to manually call untrack if you want this behavior. What I'm saying is top level stuff doesn't track, but if you were like const static count equals, you know, and you listen to count here. If you did this, see, linter rules complains. It should be, yeah, I'm suggesting that this I think one of the interesting thing, like, yeah, I'm suggesting that like this actually is an error unless you do this. And then now you're saying, hey, see, ESLints is doing an improper. What's going on here? Oh, I didn't import intrack. Yeah, sorry, but yeah. Oh, that's why. Okay, yeah. See, you see what I'm saying? Yeah, essentially. Yeah, that's essentially it. Except, yeah, that's it. Yeah, but it doesn't actually matter. Untrack has a shortcut, like. The interesting thing is, they don't. I see your argument, but the thing is, because this is a completely illegal state, they don't know like the behavior of accessing it outside has no defined behavior. It's not untracked or tracked. You just say like, look, you can't access reactive stuff in the top level component body If you want to, you either have to use it in JSX or you have to say I want it untracked. It's an error essentially. I don't think it's misleading. I think it's like, as I said, this is radical. I'm just throwing this out here. We'll probably RFC this stuff and get more feedback. Right? It's yeah. So yeah, obviously people here say they like it, but you can understand that this, if we just came in with this is kind of a breaking change, eh? You know, I do think actually top level untracks are fairly uncommon, but I could be completely wrong, right? But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, just give me a way to opt out of it. I think this is the thing. Are we gonna have to go the React path and add strict mode, or you mean opt out of it like an ES, or like, yeah? See, the problem is I can't. Here's the problem. What I'm talking about right now is a runtime mechanism. I can't. You can't opt out of it. Okay, make top level state neither tracked or untracked. Yeah, well, no, it's not going to be actually untracked. It's going to be actually an error. That's what I'm saying. But yeah, I mean, we'll have more discussions. This is just the kind of thinking that yeah, exactly. What I was thinking along that side is not per line, but like strict mode, right? Like React, you pull in a component, wrap it around your root, and now you're in strict mode. I don't know if that's the best pattern for it, but yes, this Fabio is the approach that I am thinking about. Something like a global. I don't think you can do it per line. Yes, basically. Yeah. And anyway, I'm yeah. There's no way we could introduce this that like all like there's no way we could introduce something like that without like I think it would probably be pretty brutal on the ecosystem, but I it's an interesting idea. Introduce it tomorrow. You guys are hilarious. I'm just throwing this kind of stuff out here because this is where my thinking is at, because there's a couple benefits. What this does is opens up space for future compilers because we remove ambiguous behavior. This means that in the future things will be more optimizable. It makes a clearer path for people. It makes a clear path for people learning. I think, despite what Dan is suggesting right now, I actually think that this removes a lot of ambiguity. Like, and like, yeah, it's my biggest concern is that existing code bases we didn't have this restriction on, so there's no way we can force this on people, right? That's basically the gist of it. The idea is that like newer solid stuff would perhaps take advantage of this and like it, but as I said, this is still very much just a idea that I've been like playing with. What's the best API for reading value? I mean, it's a loaded question. Honestly, there's so many different variations on this that it's hard to say. Obviously, I'm going to say that Solid's version's the best version because that's why I chose it. there's been no new APIs that I've seen that I hadn't considered when I chose Solid's API. So I will say that the only thing that I have any opinion on is that the getter should be a function. I'm not a fan of dot value for like mechanical reasons, but TypeScript suggests that I should be. So I think that's about it. Yes, you're right, and this is something that requires future like more further thought. It's just this has been, if you've been watching this whole section of the video since I started talking about this stream, like there is an interesting, like you're right. I don't actually like this particularly, but it has interesting implications. Like I'm not surprised when I suggested it that this would have a lot of support on the stream. Yeah, I mean there is an interesting thing there. The thing that I was just talking about though is a runtime mechanism. So like if it's not an error, it would be a warning. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's another way we can do it. We literally just warn people. Um, it can be annoying, just like the create root one. So yeah, I mean, I can't make these decisions by myself. I just wanted to facilitate the conversation here because I think it's an interesting one. Right? Yeah, it's interesting because um, I feel like there's a shift now where people think that the warnings are almost worse than not having the warnings. Like it's better to take a hardline stance. Um, so yeah, it's interesting. I'd say careful because I know it's a small decision, but when it gets big, you can't break things fast anymore. Exactly, which is why I've been very careful to this point. You know, trying to like, you know, but as I said, these are just these are just interesting ideas at this point. I am aware that the people who've chosen Solid so far, like people are building real applications on it, so it's not like you go and cause them pain. I have no interest in doing that. We're way too early days. In any case, I think that's enough of a conversation about this for now. I just want to kind of like put out there kind of sort of thinking about this because um, it's very clear to me that perceptions on this sort of thing have changed drastically over the last couple of years.
Okay.
Anyway, I don't know. I think I'm good. I was not intending this to be such a long stream, but here we are. So, anyways, yeah, I think I'm gonna call it here. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. The timing of Solid Start is definitely in my mind as well. Yep. Thank you very much. Have a good weekend, everyone. Thank you for joining me on this long ranting, rambling of a stream. All right. Till next time.
Oh, I wish Ryan would rate me, right? Okay. So what do we have here? I think I'm kind of finished. I'm kind of done. I'm I'm showcasing this like server stuff. The split thing didn't work. I'm using I'm actually using the forked version of Bling, like my version, because the other one doesn't work. Do we have anything interesting? So we could add that tweet. Um, use chat GPT with rate limiting uh, what else? Use ChatGPT with rate limiting. There is actually like a streaming API, so it looks like the real one when it's like typing typing along, but I think it's more trouble than worth to implement it. So app uh, use ChatGPT API with rate limiting Upstash. And type save RPC. Using SSR solid solid router. What else? Rate limiting Upstash type safe RPC using SSR solid router. Solid router feed Astro QGP. Okay, I think I hit all the keywords. Okay. Okay, so try that. We tried that. I think the funny story is like Upstash. Um, uh, Upstash story, right? So where I have where is it like Upstash rate limit? Stash rate limit. Okay. Give me a second. Okay. I think I'm dropping off soon. So okay, the story. So we need the story. By the way, uh, big oof. I need a big oof. couldn't use Upstash rate limit npm package because it literally installs the whole next 13 facepalm. So I had to fork it. Fork it here. You go. You if you have the same problem type, and now we go to what is it? Open and load. How do I get permalink? Permalink. Okay. Big poof. Okay. That's it. Thanks everyone for hanging out, and